Hello, this is Max Grossman with the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and today we are honored to have Fabiola Arellano,
Yes.
who is a candidate for District 3. And we want to begin by stating outright that we wholeheartedly endorse Fabiola. Without reservations, we think that she is by far the most qualified candidate of the 5 candidates for this race. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate it.
Great. So let's start with your experience. You're from El Paso.
Yes.
Born and raised where?
Born in El Paso and raised in District 3 on Debbie Street, which is about 2 minutes away from Album Park.
Okay.
I went to Scottsdale Elementary School and graduated from Eastwood High School.
Eastwood High School. Okay,
Yes.
good. Excellent. And then at 18 years old, you joined the military.
Correct.
11 years.
Yes, I joined the military when I was 18. I worked in top secret communication centers. I held the highest top secret clearance, which is SBI SCI. I was stationed in Korea for a year. After Korea, I was stationed in Brooklyn, New York, Fort Hamilton. I got out of the military, then I stayed in the Army National Guard full-time for 3 years. After that, I did 3 more years in the New York National Guard for a total of about 10 and a half years, almost 11.
That's extraordinary. Thank you so much for your service to our country. We always love military service here. So eventually you decided to go to law school.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
When I got out of I was still in the military. I was going to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I got my bachelor's degree in 1994, and then I went to Brooklyn Law School, graduated in 1999, and then I went to business school, Baruch College, and graduated in 2008.
Excellent. That's wonderful. And you practiced law in New York for how long?
I've been an attorney since 2000. I came back to El Paso last year, so I practiced 23 years.
23 years law in New York.
Not all the years, because I also worked as a financial advisor.
Oh.
I also worked as an auditor, auditing hedge funds for PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the top 4 accounting firms in the country.
Okay, so you have extensive experience with numbers.
Yes.
You can read a balance sheet.
Absolutely.
You understand revenues and expenditures.
Yes, and I actually plan on reading when I get elected and I start in January, I plan to have read the 929-page balance, the whole 929 pages of
the budget book.
Budget, yes, the proposed budget for El Paso, because I believe that the answers are in those 929 pages as to where our money's going.
Indeed they are. And tell us, what kind of law did you practice in New York?
In New York, I worked for the Department of Housing Preservation and Development for 7 years, making sure that the landlords in the Bronx provided heat and hot water, that they removed lead paint violations, and that the housing was safe. And if they didn't, I would ask the judge to penalize them civil penalties. So in the 7 years, I got a lot of civil penalties from the landlords in the Bronx.
You made friends with the slumlords.
They didn't like me very much. I also worked for myself as a single practitioner for about 10 years, and then I also worked as an immigration attorney doing special immigrant juvenile visa cases for kids. I did 94 cases in various courts, and I never lost a case because those kids mattered to me.
Wow, that's very impressive. So at a certain point, you decided to move back to your hometown, come back to El Paso. What prompted you to do that?
I actually, after I graduated business school in 2008, I moved back to El Paso. The economy wasn't doing well, so I didn't find a job in El Paso. So that's when I moved back to New York and started working as an auditing hedge funds and as an auditor. But I kept missing El Paso, and even though I wanted to leave El Paso so bad when I was a kid, after being away for 3 decades, I really wanted to come back to my hometown. So I decided to come back last year, and here I am.
So you've got extensive military experience, extensive experience auditing, including with a very large firm that audited hedge funds.
Yes.
And you hold an MBA.
A master's in accountancy. A master's of science
Master's in accountancy.
in accountancy.
Okay, and of course your JD, your law degree.
Yes.
That's a lot of professional preparation. Okay. And here we are in El Paso, and you moved back when, pardon me?
In March of last year, 2023.
March of 2023, about a year and a half ago. And what has driven you to run for District 3?
Being back and being in my hometown and seeing where El Paso is and the people that were running at the time. There was 2 candidates running. I thought that I could do a better job, and also my mother growing up always told me that I had to give back to society, that I had to be a productive member of society, and I believe that by giving back to my community, I will be able to honor my mother and my aunts and my grandmothers and the women that came before me to do right, because this country and El Paso has given so much to the women in my family.
Excellent. So, Cassandra Hernandez is the person who is the current city representative of District 3. When she leaves office on January 7th, she will have been there for 8 years,
Yes.
2 full terms. Currently, she's a candidate for mayor, but she's holding on to her seat until the end of her term. And it's no secret that the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt has been very critical of her tenure as city council representative, because she voted to raise our property tax 6 times, because she voted to issue hundreds of millions of dollars of certificates of obligation without voter approval, which of course drove our taxes much higher. She has supported every boondoggle that came across her desk: the arena, TERS 13, poorly crafted 380 agreements, the Great Wolf Lodge, the Great Wolf Lodge land swap. I could go on and on and on, and is even on the record that she wants to bond more money and get to another quality of life bond. And if that weren't enough, reprimanded, of course, for abusing her gas card, which was freely used by her husband, possibly others. That was in the news quite a bit. So our first major question to you has to be, how do you feel about Cassandra's performance now that it said all those awful things?
Well, I am diametrically opposed to her actions. I would do things completely opposite. I commit to holding to the no new revenue tax rate. I believe that we already have billions of dollars in debt. We don't need any more debt. You can't spend $100 when you only have $10 in your pocket. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I believe again that looking at those 929 pages of the proposed budget is where we go in there and we find out exactly where the money's going, and we do audits and we hold the heads of the departments accountable for where our money's going, how it's being used or misused.
How do you feel about our current level of taxation, property taxes?
When I came back last year, I was looking to buy a house, and I actually bought a house in November, but it had tenants, and so I gave them a 2-year lease and stayed in my apartment. But when I saw the taxes, I was taken aback. I was thinking maybe I should go buy a house in New Mexico. I was taken aback. I was shocked. So I started looking for the smallest house. My house is like 1,000 square feet that I purchased, and I said, "This is crazy." And then I started to do research and read articles how El Paso property taxes are in the top 15 cities in the country, and we have about 20,000 cities. Then I read that out of the 50 largest cities in the country, El Paso was number 2. And then I read somewhere that as far as Texas, El Paso's number 1 with the highest property taxes.
Among major cities, it is, yeah. Our taxes are absurd, and we have low wages on top of it.
Correct. El Paso has one of the highest property rates. And to have taxes that high, to me, says there's inefficiencies, there's incompetence, there's waste, there's fraud, and there's corruption.
Speaking of waste, fraud, and corruption, it's well known that I sued the city of El Paso to prevent the construction of a multi-purpose center for G League basketball and concerts in our downtown, and the reason is, number 1, the city was going to use eminent domain, which I oppose. Number 2, they were going to displace a large number of very vulnerable people, and I know as an immigration attorney, you're with us on that. Number 3, the city was going to destroy irreplaceable historic buildings that tell our history and culture. And once they're gone, they're gone. And then, of course, number 4, the cost. We were told it was going to be $180 million, and then we learned it was going to be over $500 million. And so, I'm proud to have stopped that project, but other projects went through anyway, right? We've got a ballpark that needs a $5 million a year subsidy. We have 4 new water parks that are all upside down financially. We have a trolley system that bleeds money because it just goes around in a circle and doesn't really serve very many people. And we seem to have a penchant for these large capital improvement projects, so-called amenities. All of them very expensive to build, very expensive to operate, money losers. And we expect El Pasoans to support this when something like 30 or 40% of El Pasoans are really struggling. Many of them are hungry, and yet the city has been dumping these projects into their property tax bills. So how do you feel about the city being in the entertainment business? Should our city be subsidizing these large capital improvement projects, or instead should we be seeking private investors to build these things?
I say private investors should be the ones to build these arenas, not the taxpayers. The taxpayers should not be building these arenas. I'm opposed to spending taxpayer money because we should use taxpayer money for the basic services to ensure that our neighborhoods are safe, that when you call 911, that they're dispatched and they're getting there quickly. The infrastructure with all the streets and the potholes and the missing stop sign and the missing lights. Let's get the basics done first. So no, I don't want to use taxpayer dollars for these types of supposed quality of life. These quality of life, the only quality of life that's being improved is that of the developers.
That's exactly correct. You nailed that one. What about certificates of obligation? The city of El Paso accounts for 29% of our property tax bill, right? There are 5 taxing entities. Mm-hmm. We're 29%. In 2014, we were 25%. Now we're 29%, as the city has been eating up a larger and larger proportion of the pie because of its penchant for spending and bonding. So of the $2.3 billion that the city owes in principal and interest, $852 million of that is principal and interest on debt that we did not get to vote on. That is a Texas record. It is more CO debt than the top 5 cities in Texas combined. Houston and Dallas combined have less than $50 million in CO debt. They only issue CO debt in case of floods and tornadoes, like real emergencies. We issue CO debt to pay for things like streets, but also entertainment projects, right? Whatever meets our fancy. And the current city council, I think, has really put an end to that practice. Under what conditions would you support issuing a certificate of obligation without voter approval?
Well, at first I said, well, after you telling me that it's almost $1 billion, at this point, there should be no more certificates of obligation, period. But if there wasn't $1 billion, right, I would say, let's look at the amount. Let's look, is it an emergency? Are we using it for a core service or a disaster? I would have to take it case by case. And again, at this point, I believe that any amount, no, it has to go before the voters. It has to go before the voters. It's too much, almost $1 billion. That's crazy. That's outrageous.
Now, there's been a change on City Council since January 3rd, when Brian Kennedy and others were sworn in, January 3rd, 2023. The City Council has shifted sharply in favor of the taxpayer. It's been great to see. The former city manager was terminated without cause. His contract was ended.
Yes.
And now we have much better leadership on staff. And of course, the city achieved the no new revenue tax rate, no tax increase for 2 years in a row. But in 2026, almost certainly we're going to have to increase taxes. And that is because there are $600 million in voter-approved debt, general obligation bonds, that are coming online in fiscal years 26, 27, 28, and 29. And so the city council that's in place right now, most of them did not vote for that, but it's coming through the pipeline. And there are going to be some tough decisions to be made in fiscal year 2026. So the budget talks are going to be in 2025. In August, you're going to decide on a 2026 budget. And I imagine that you'd work as hard as you possibly can to lessen the impact of that to the extent possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want taxes to go up anymore. I don't want any more debt. I need to look at that budget and figure out how we can hold departments accountable to make sure that they're using the money that they're getting effectively and efficiently and not wasting it. Or, for instance, the Chapter 380 incentive agreements, that the audit that showed that out of 7 companies that were audited, almost 5 million, and they say it was misused, taxpayer money was misused. I don't use the term misuse, I use the term fraud and corruption.
No, I'm completely with you there. And we speak the same language, Fabiola. I think that in your heart, you're a fiscal conservative.
Oh, yeah.
We're probably close to the same age. We come from a certain kind of thinking, and we both worked very hard in our lives. We bought houses, and we understand that if you really want to help people, including vulnerable people, you keep their tax burden low,
Yes.
so they can pull themselves up and invest and build something without being taxed out of El Paso.
Yes. What about the elderly?
Especially.
What about the young couples
Yes.
with a newborn baby? How are they going to afford to buy the American dream of owning a home?
Yes.
What about people after they finally finished those 30 years and finished paying their mortgage, right? And now they have a tax bill that's equivalent to renting a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio. I mean, what's the point of finishing paying off your debt if now you have the equivalent of a rent?
Exactly. Now currently, you are in the DA's office, correct?
Correct.
Accounting, and you're in prosecution.
Yes.
And you're waiting for the results of the bar exam?
No, actually, I took the bar and I was doing my campaign work, trying to study for the bar. My dog had surgery. My best friend got hospitalized. I threw my dog after surgery, and we drove to New York. 5 hours away in Pennsylvania, my Jeep broke down. I was stranded. It took 2 months to fix it. I flew in to take the bar, and I missed it by 4 points.
Wow.
I got a 266, which means I passed it a second time in New York, and I passed it in 24 other states, but not Texas, so I'm taking it again in February, because I never give up.
As you shouldn't. And of course, as an attorney in the DA's office, ethics are paramount, right?
Absolutely.
You're not the kind of person who would abuse your privileges, who would take your discretionary funds and share it with people who are not supposed to spend it.
Absolutely not.
Or end up reprimanded for illegal behavior. That's not you.
No, we have people in the misdemeanor court because they stole $30 from a grocery store, and they get arrested. The law applies to everyone.
Yeah, especially if you're a city leader.
Especially because you need to, I believe you lead by example. I lead by example, and I comport myself with integrity and high ethical standards, and I hold myself accountable to the people who elect me. Every elected official needs to have high ethical standards and comport themselves with integrity and lead by example.
We couldn't agree more. So Fabiola, let's talk a little bit about your competitors. This is a broad race. There are 5 people running in this race. Now, 2 of your competitors I'm going to just discount completely. Jose Rodriguez is a realtor, and his realtor page is where he advertises his candidacy. And so it just seems to me, and I'm just speaking for myself, not for you, that he is using his candidacy to sell property, and we are not for that. I texted him and asked him if he plans to continue the policies of Cassandra Hernandez if elected, and he refused to answer the question. And then there's Jesse Romero, who is a website developer, same thing. He mixes his business with his candidacy. I texted him. I asked if he planned to continue the policies of Cassandra Hernandez. He refused to answer the question. It's a basic question, right? I mean,
Correct.
It's a basic question. These 2 guys also failed to submit the questionnaire to the El Paso Times. And if you're going to submit a questionnaire, that's the one you don't want to miss. We have one daily newspaper. They ask you where you stand on policy, and you don't ignore the questionnaire. These 2 men did, Rodriguez and Romero. That leaves 3 candidates. And these 3 candidates could not be more different. Fabiola, of course, is the fiscally conservative candidate with a lot of acumen in accounting and in the law, and of course, more than a decade of military experience. Her webpage cites controlling crime. Of course, she's in the DA's office. She would request audits of all departments to ensure no further misuse of taxpayer money as a priority. She would especially work on street repairs, maintenance, infrastructure, but above all, taxpayer money. That must be spent really carefully. And so we agree with you completely. Now, every local race has an oligarchy candidate. It's a term that we use liberally at the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt. That is a candidate who's supported by the big developers and their bankers and attorneys. And you can sometimes never be sure who that candidate is until you finally see their financial reports. That candidate is Diana Maldonado Rocha, who had a corporate career with AT&T for 28 years, so she has a lot of business acumen, business experience, but her webpage doesn't say much about her. I asked her if she plans to continue the policies of Cassandra Hernandez, her predecessor. She refused to answer the question, demanded to meet me in person, and I responded to her, well, why won't you answer this question? And she wouldn't answer the question, so I didn't meet with her. But that said, her 30-day report shows $2,500 from Woody Hunt, $2,500 from Rick Francis, $1,000 from Escudero, $1,000 from Stanley Job. And of course, that gives her the confidence to loan $12,000 to herself. So I'm just going to say it. We have never seen an exception to this. When you take money from these individuals, you are for higher taxes, more bonding, more amenities. You just are. And that's not 95%, 98%, it's 100%. And I've been in this business 15 years. Whenever these people donate to that candidate is going to vote in a certain way and is completely predictable. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, she is one of the ones to beat. Now the other is Kenneth Bell. Kenneth Bell is a good man. I interviewed him as well. He also has a lot of military experience, and he's an ethical person, but he is very far to the left on social issues, and he strikes me as the kind of man who would not stay in his lane, but veer into state and federal issues, immigration, abortion, areas that do not necessarily have to do with the job. And of course, we can all have very strong opinions about these things, and we should, on federal and state policy. But the job of a city council representative is the job of a city council representative. So, he was the head of Veronica Carvajal's PAC. He supported Proposition K, the climate initiative, which went down in flames. 90% of the voters opposed it. It was radical. It would have punished businesses way too much. And, I asked him questions like, would you advocate for divesting from Israel if you were a city council rep? And most people would say, well, that has nothing to do with my job. And his answer was, well, I don't know. I would have to look at it. What? Excuse me? All right. My own Judaism aside. In any case, we have an oligarchy candidate, a candidate who's very far to the left, who I would describe as a social activist. And there's nothing wrong with that. He can do that. And we have you. You strike us as pragmatic, on target. Do you have any thoughts about your opponents in this race?
I believe that compared to my opponents, I am the most qualified. None of us have served, right, in city council. We're all running for the first time. However, because I also was an officer in the military. I had a platoon. I was a second lieutenant. Had a platoon of 30 soldiers. Wow. I have military leadership experience. I have over 20 years experience as an attorney, and I have a master's in accounting. I worked as an auditor and a financial advisor. So I have these skills to be able to understand complex issues that arise in government and be able to help with the other council members and the mayor and the city manager run the city effectively and efficiently. I have those skills that the other candidates do not have.
Most excellent. And if our viewers would like to donate to your cause, where can they find you online?
Online, I'm vote, the number 4, Fabiola H, Arellano.com.
Say that one more time.
It's vote for Fabiola H, Arellano.com.
Okay, and that's where we can go to learn more about your policies.
Yes.
As well as to make a donation to your campaign.
Correct, Max.
Okay. And again, I want to restate that the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt absolutely endorses Fabiola Arellano for City District 3. We hope that you will come out to vote for her starting on Monday with early voting, and of course on Election Day, November 5th. It is very, very important that she wins this race so that she can join Brian Kennedy, Joe Molinar, Art Fierro, and the other fiscally conservative members of City Council to keep us on the right course, to keep the ship going in the correct direction. In any case, we want to thank you.
Thank you, Max.
This interview was a great pleasure for us and an honor. Thank you again for your military service. Thank you for your service to our community, and every success.
Thank you for your endorsement.
And
Thank you so
Godspeed.
much. Godspeed.
Thank you.